My brother is a hero to everyone in this town, a miracle father, a survivor. But 3 years ago, while I was lying on an operating table saving his life, he was busy stealing mine. He didn't just want my bone marrow, he wanted my legacy. He thought he could harvest my DNA like a crop and keep me in the dark forever. But secrets have a funny way of leaking out, and I'm about to make sure his miracle becomes his nightmare. My brother, Julian, was always the golden boy. He was a prestigious pediatric surgeon, the kind of guy who gets featured in the local news for giving back. I was the younger brother, the tech guy, successful but quiet, living in the shadow of his massive ego. 4 years ago, the golden boy's world crumbled. Julian was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive form of leukemia. The only thing that could save him was a bone marrow transplant. The family was tested. My parents weren't a match. His wife, Elena, obviously wasn't. I was a 10 out of 10 match. I remember the day he told me. He sat in my living room, tears streaming down his face, clutching my hand. "Mark," he whispered, "I'm terrified, not for me, but for the family Elena and I will never have. The chemo, it's going to make me sterile. We'll never have a child. My line ends here." I felt for him, I really did. I told him, "Don't worry about the kids yet, Jules. Let's just get you healthy." The procedure was grueling. I went under general anesthesia to have the marrow harvested from my hip. It was painful, but I did it gladly. I loved my brother. When he went into remission, we celebrated. He was a survivor. 6 months later, a miracle happened. Elena was pregnant. Julian told everyone it was a medical anomaly, a 1 in a million chance that his fertility had returned before the heavy radiation. He called the baby, Leo, his miracle son. I was the proud uncle. I held that boy in the hospital, looking down at his tuft of dark hair and those familiar blue eyes. People at the christening joked, "Man, Mark, he looks more like you than his own dad." We all laughed. I took it as a compliment to our family genes. But as Leo grew, the coincidence became haunting. At 2 years old, Leo didn't just look like me, he had my exact cowlick. He had the same rare birthmark on his left shoulder that I have, one that Julian doesn't. He even walked with the same slight inward turn of the right foot that I'd needed physical therapy for as a kid. The seed of doubt didn't grow all at once. It was a slow, poisonous vine. I started noticing how Julian acted around me and the boy. He wasn't just protective, he was nervous. Every time I'd play with Leo, Julian would find a reason to take him away. He stopped inviting me over. He started gaslighting me, telling our parents that I was obsessing over the kid and that it was making Elena uncomfortable. I was being pushed out of my own family for the crime of looking too much like my nephew. I decided to settle my mind. I didn't want it to be true. I bought 2 DNA kits, one for me, and I managed to snag a used pacifier from Leo's diaper bag during a rare family dinner. I thought, I'll run the test, see that we share 25% DNA as uncle and nephew, and I'll realize I'm just being a paranoid narcissist. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. I opened the PDF at 2 a.m. I didn't see 25%. I saw 99.9%. The screen felt like it was vibrating. The words "parent-child relationship confirmed" burned into my retinas. My brother hadn't had a miracle. He had committed a theft so personal, so biological, it felt like he had ripped a piece out of my soul. I sat there in the dark, my hip aching where they'd taken the marrow 3 years ago, and I realized they hadn't just taken marrow that day. While I was unconscious, Julian and his wife had conspired with someone in that clinic to harvest more than just bone. They had harvested a life. And now I was going to find out exactly how they did it. The discovery didn't just break my heart. It broke my sense of reality. Every memory of the last 3 years, every time I'd changed Leo's diaper, every time I'd bought him a birthday present, every time I'd hugged my brother and told him I was happy for his miracle, it all felt like a movie where I was the only person who didn't know I was the victim. I couldn't just confront them, not yet. Julian was a high-status surgeon. Elena came from a family of lawyers. If I walked in there with a printed-out DNA report from a consumer website, they would call me unstable. They would get a restraining order. They would take my son, because that's what he was, and disappear. I had to have surgery. I had to find out how they did it. I spent weeks retracing the steps of the transplant. I looked at the hospital records, but everything looked clean on the surface. That's when I remembered the extra consent forms Julian had asked me to sign while I was groggy on pre-op meds. He'd told me they were just standard liability waivers for the marrow extraction. I hired a private investigator who specialized in medical malpractice. We dug into the staff who were on duty that day. One name kept popping up, Sarah Miller, a fertility lab technician who had mysteriously retired 3 months after my surgery, despite being only 34. We found her living in a house that she shouldn't have been able to afford on a tech's salary. I didn't send the PI. I went myself. I sat in my car outside her house for 4 hours until she came out to get the mail. I stepped out, holding a photo of Leo. "He has my eyes," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and exhaustion. She froze. She knew exactly who I was. "I didn't want to do it," she whispered 10 minutes later, sitting at her kitchen table. "Julian, he said it was for the best. He said you were okay with it, but that the official paperwork was too slow. He paid me $20,000 to divert a sample during your sedation. He told me it was a family matter." The miracle wasn't a fluke of nature, it was a heist. Julian had used his position as a doctor to bypass every ethical safeguard in the building. He had literally harvested his own brother while I was lying there, defenseless, saving his life. The psychological toll was massive. I couldn't sleep. I'd be at work, looking at a line of code, and suddenly I'd see Leo's face. I felt a biological pull that was so strong it was physical. I wanted to scream at the world that my brother was a monster. But then the gaslighting reached a new level. Julian, sensing I was withdrawing, went on the offensive. He started telling our parents that I was suffering from PTSD from the surgery. He suggested I should seek intensive psychiatric help. He even called my boss and hinted that my mental state was a liability to the company. He was trying to institutionalize the only witness to his crime. He threw a life celebration dinner for his 3-year remission anniversary. Our whole family was there. I sat across the table from him, watching him cut into a steak, laughing, the picture of health. Elena was beside him, playing the doting wife, occasionally glancing at me with a look of pure, cold calculation. "Mark, you're so quiet. You should be happy. You're the reason I'm here. You gave me everything." He said it with a smirk, a hidden meaning that only he and Elena understood. "You gave me everything. My life, my career, and my son." I looked at him, and for a second the room went cold. I realized that Julian didn't love me. He didn't even see me as a brother. To him, I was just a spare parts bin, a biological resource to be exploited whenever his golden boy life hit a snag. "You're right, Julian," I said, my voice like ice. "I did give you everything, and I think it's time for an audit." He laughed it off, but I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought his medical degree and his money made him untouchable. But he forgot one thing. I'm a tech guy. I deal with data. And data doesn't lie, it doesn't have miracles, and it never, ever forgets. That night, I didn't go home. I went back to the PI. I told him we weren't just looking for medical records anymore. I wanted Julian's professional life. I wanted his finances. I wanted every dark corner of that perfect career brought into the light. Because if Julian wanted to play God with my DNA, he was about to find out what happens when a real creator decides to hit delete. The next 3 months were a masterclass in controlled fury. While Julian was busy playing the role of the benevolent surgeon, I was turning his life into a digital crime scene. Revenge, when done right, isn't a tantrum, it's an architecture. My first move was the legal insurance. I didn't go to a family lawyer. I went to a high-powered firm that specialized in reproductive fraud and medical battery. When I showed them the DNA results and the signed affidavit from Sarah Miller, the lab tech, their lead attorney looked like he'd just seen a ghost. "Mark," he said, "this isn't just a lawsuit. This is a criminal conspiracy. Your brother didn't just break a family bond, he violated federal medical statutes. But if we move now, he'll use his connections to bury the evidence. We need to catch him in the act of a cover-up." So I played the grateful brother one last time. I set up a family legacy cloud drive, telling Julian and Elena I wanted to digitize all our old family photos for Leo's future. Julian, in his arrogance, thought this was a sign that I was finally accepting my place as the doting uncle. He gave me access to his personal home network to sync the files. That was his second fatal mistake. While the photos were syncing, my scripts were running in the background. I wasn't looking for pictures, I was looking for the paper trail. I found the encrypted emails between Julian and the corrupt clinic staff. I found the ledger where he'd recorded the off-the-books payments to Sarah Miller, categorized as consultation fees. But the biggest prize? I found out that Julian had been doing this for years. My brother wasn't just a surgeon, he was a narcissist who couldn't handle failure. I found records of 3 other miracle surgeries he'd performed where the outcomes were too perfect to be legal. He had been cutting corners, falsifying patient data to keep his success rate at 100%. He had built his entire career on a foundation of lies, and Leo was just the crown jewel of his deception. Now it was time for the psychological squeeze. I started sending Julian anonymous gifts, a baby blanket with my birthmark pattern embroidered on it. A book on the ethics of genetic consent was left on his office desk. I watched him through the family's shared security camera app as he paced his living room, sweating, snapping at Elena, his golden boy persona starting to crack under the weight of his own paranoia. He called me, his voice frantic. "Mark, have you been talking to people? About the transplant? About Leo?" "Why would I do that, Jules?" I replied, my voice smooth as silk. "Leo is a miracle, remember? Although he is starting to look so much like me that people are starting to ask questions. Maybe we should do a public DNA test for a father-son charity event. Imagine the publicity for your clinic." The silence on the other end of the line was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. He was trapped. If he said no, he looked suspicious. If he said yes, he was finished. The final piece of the plan was the professional takedown. I didn't just want him to lose his son. I wanted him to lose the thing he loved most, his status. I compiled every forged document, every illegal payment, and every medical ethics violation into a single, massive conflict code dossier. I didn't send it to the police first. I sent it to the medical board and the hospital's board of directors, timed exactly 1 hour before Julian was set to receive the Surgeon of the Year award at the city's annual medical gala. I wanted him to be at his highest peak when the ground vanished beneath his feet. Elena realized the walls were closing in and tried to reach out. She sent me a text. "We can settle this, Mark. Think of Leo. Don't destroy his father." I replied with a single sentence. "I'm not destroying his father. I'm introducing him to his real one." The night of the medical gala arrived. Julian stood backstage in his tuxedo, adjusting his tie, ready to accept his trophy in front of 500 of the most influential people in the state. He thought he was about to solidify his legacy. He had no idea that the Uncle Mark he'd tried to gaslight was sitting in the front row, holding a remote that would play a very different kind of tribute video. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and silk gowns. The air was thick with the clinking of crystal and the smug hum of the elite. Julian stood at the center of the head table, the golden boy in his natural habitat. He looked down at me from the dais, and for a split second he gave me a nod, a silent, arrogant command to stay in my lane. Then the board president took the stage. "Tonight we honor a man whose hands perform miracles and whose heart belongs to his family. To present our Surgeon of the Year, we have a special video tribute." The lights dimmed. Julian leaned back, a practiced, humble smile plastered on his face. The screen flickered to life. But it wasn't a montage of Julian in the OR. It was a grainy, high-definition recording from a hidden camera. It was the footage I'd captured of Sarah Miller, the lab tech, sitting in her kitchen. "Julian Sterling paid me $20,000 to harvest his brother's sperm while he was under for a marrow transplant." Her voice echoed through the silent ballroom. "He told me Mark would never know. He told me it was a family arrangement." The room didn't just go quiet, it went cold. I watched Julian's smile slide off his face like melting wax. He tried to stand, but his legs seemed to have turned to water. Then the screen shifted. It displayed a side-by-side comparison of our DNA profiles. 99.9% paternity, not uncle, father. Below that, the dossier of deception began to scroll. The forged signatures, the offshore payments, the falsified patient records from his perfect surgeries. 500 of his peers watched in horror as the golden boy was stripped bare, layer by layer, until there was nothing left but a common thief. "This is a lie!" Julian screamed, his voice cracking, echoing through the speakers. "This is a digital fabrication! Mark is unstable!" I stood up from the front row. I didn't need to. "The police are in the lobby, Julian, and the medical board has the originals. You didn't just steal my DNA, you stole the trust of every patient who ever laid on your table." 2 plainclothes officers stepped onto the stage. The Surgeon of the Year trophy sat abandoned on the podium as Julian was led out in handcuffs, his tuxedo jacket bunched up behind his back. Elena followed, her face a mask of frozen terror, realized that the life she had helped steal was over. The fallout was a nuclear winter for our family. My parents were devastated, torn between the son who had committed a crime and the son who had been the victim. But when they saw the evidence, when they realized Julian had planned to institutionalize me to keep his secret, the choice became clear. The legal battle for Leo was the hardest thing I've ever done. Julian fought from behind bars, using every cent of his dwindling legal fund to keep me away. But the truth is a stubborn thing. I didn't take Leo away from the only home he knew immediately. I'm not a monster, but I am his father. Over the last year, we've rebuilt. I'm no longer the uncle who visits on holidays. I'm the man who tucks him in every night. Julian lost his medical license, his freedom, and his reputation. He's serving 6 years for medical battery and fraud. He still sends letters from prison, claiming he did it for the family. He still doesn't get it. You don't build a family by destroying your brother. Sometimes I look at Leo and I see the best parts of myself and the worst parts of the man who tried to steal him. It's a reminder that legacy isn't something you can harvest in a lab. It's something you earn through truth, through sacrifice, and through the courage to stand up when your own blood tries to drown you. I saved Julian's life with my marrow, and then I saved my son's life with the truth. They say blood is thicker than water, but in this case, blood was the weapon. Mark saved his brother's life, and his brother tried to steal his soul. If this story made your blood boil, let us know in the comments. How far would you go to reclaim what was stolen from you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We're decoding the darkest conflicts every week. This is the Conflict Code.